Through the gleaming windows of New Seoul's spaceport, He Jin watched ships coming and going against the backdrop of the setting sun. The massive crystal spires of the city caught the light, sending rainbows dancing across the docking bays. As a cargo inspector, he had seen thousands of vessels come and go, but something about the Miraxian merchant ship in Bay 17 bothered him. He Jin walked slowly around the ship, his tablet displaying the manifest. The captain had declared common trade goods, processed food, textiles, and basic machine parts. But the power readings from the ship's systems told a different story. The life support systems were drawing far too much power for a simple cargo vessel. "Sir, we need to complete the inspection quickly," the Miraxian first officer said, his scaled skin shifting colors with anxiety. "We have a schedule to keep." He Jin nodded politely but continued his careful examination. At 25, he was young for his position, but his attention to detail had earned him respect among his colleagues. He ran his hand along the hull, noting how the metal felt warmer than it should. Deep within the ship's cargo hold, Kira lay curled in her containment pod, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her naturally luminescent markings, which should have glowed with swirling patterns of blue and green, were dim and lifeless. The pod barely gave her enough room to move, and its walls pressed in around her like a coffin. 3 cycles ago, she had been a respected researcher on her home world, studying the artistic traditions of different species. The Luminary were known across the galaxy for their living light shows, using their bioluminescence to create stunning displays that could move audiences to tears. Kira had been particularly talented, able to weave complex stories with nothing but light and shadow. Now she was cargo, her captors seeing her only as an exotic commodity to be sold to the highest bidder. They had attacked her research vessel without warning, killing most of the crew and taking a few prisoners. Kira still had nightmares about that day. The screams of her colleagues, the harsh laughter of the raiders, the moment when they discovered her ability to create especially vivid light patterns. The pod's environmental controls hummed, keeping her alive but uncomfortable. They fed her only enough to maintain her health, and the constant darkness was especially cruel to a species that lived for light. Yet Kira refused to let them break her spirit. In the darkness, she practiced her art, creating tiny shows of light that only she could see. Outside, He Jin's inspection brought him to the cargo manifest's power allocation tables. Years of experience had taught him to spot irregularities, and these numbers were definitely wrong. The ship was using enough power to maintain complex life support systems, but claimed to carry only non-living cargo. "First officer," He Jin called out, keeping his voice professionally neutral. "Could you explain why your life support systems are drawing power equivalent to supporting 20 additional passengers?" The Miraxian scales rippled with darker colors. "A malfunction in the reading systems, surely. We can have our engineer check it once we're underway." He Jin made a show of checking other readings while actually scanning for life signs. The ship's shielding blocked most scans, but he caught brief flickers of biological activity where there shouldn't be any. Something was definitely wrong here. In her pod, Kira sensed the ship had docked. The vibrations were different, and she could hear distant voices. Hope flared briefly in her chest, making her markings glow slightly brighter before she forced them dark again. Hope was dangerous. She had hoped during previous stops, only to have those hopes crushed when the ship continued its journey. But this stop felt different. The usual quick exchange of goods wasn't happening. Instead, there were long periods of silence broken by worried voices. Kira pressed her ear against the pod's wall, straining to hear anything that might tell her what was happening. He Jin knew he had to be careful. If he was right about his suspicions, confronting the crew directly could put any prisoners in danger. He needed to alert his superiors without tipping off the Miraxians. "Everything seems to be in order," he lied smoothly, making the show of closing his inspection programs. "Just one final scan for restricted materials, and you'll be free to go." The first officer's scales settled into a more natural pattern. "Of course, standard procedure." He Jin walked toward the exit, casually activating the emergency inspection alert on his tablet. Within minutes, port security would quietly surround the ship. The Miraxians wouldn't realize anything was wrong until it was too late. As he reached the airlock, He-Jin glanced back at the cargo hold. Somewhere in there, he was almost certain, were people being trafficked across the galaxy. His heart ached thinking about their suffering, but he had to stick to procedure. One wrong move could mean death for the prisoners. Kira's markings flickered as she caught snippets of conversation. Something about scans and security. She barely dared to breathe. The Miraxians sounded nervous, their usual confident voices now tight with worry. Was it possible? Could someone have noticed something wrong? She placed her hand against the pod's wall, creating the faintest pattern of light. A universal distress signal used by space-faring races. It was risky, but if there was even a chance of rescue, she had to try. The stories of her people were filled with tales of hope in darkness, of light returning after the longest night. Perhaps it was time for her own story of darkness to end. He-Jin stepped out of the ship just as security forces began taking up positions around Bay 17. Soon, they would search the vessel and find whatever, or whoever, the Miraxians were trying to hide. He didn't know it yet, but his attention to detail was about to change not only his life, but the lives of several prisoners, including a talented luminary artist who had never stopped hoping for rescue. Do Young's mansion towered over the exclusive Crystal Heights district of New Seoul, its elegant curves hiding dark secrets behind polished walls. Inside, Kira stood motionless in the grand ballroom, her bioluminescent markings forced to pulse in patterns that pleased her captor's guests. The wealthy merchant had purchased her from the Miraxian traders for an enormous sum, viewing her as nothing more than a living art piece. Tonight's party was like many others, the rich and powerful gathering to show off their wealth and make deals in the shadows. Kira's natural glow cast soft colors across their faces as they laughed and drank, none of them questioning why a luminary would choose to be here, so far from her homeworld. "Make the lights dance faster," Do Young commanded, his words slurring slightly from expensive wine. "My guests want to see the rainbow effect." Kira complied, her markings shifting through colors that would have told stories of great beauty on her homeworld. Here, they were reduced to simple entertainment. Her feet ached from standing for hours, but she didn't dare move. The last time she had shifted position without permission, she had spent 3 days in complete darkness, a punishment that felt like torture to her light-dependent species. Behind the public display of wealth and sophistication, Kira's daily life was filled with endless work. When not performing for guests, she cleaned the massive house, prepared meals, and tended to Do Young's rare plant collection. The plants needed special light frequencies to grow, which her bioluminescence could provide. She worked from dawn until well past midnight, surviving on barely enough food to maintain her glow. Yet in her mind, Kira remained free. While scrubbing floors or watering plants, she silently recited the ancient poems of her people. The epic of first light, passed down through generations, told of how the luminary first learned to harness their inner glow. The Ballad of the Star Dancers described great artists who could paint entire nebula with their light. These memories kept her spirit alive. Do Young's wife, Sun Mai, was perhaps even crueler than her husband. She delighted in finding fault with Kira's work, using any excuse to deny her meals or rest. "Your kind are meant to serve," she would say, her perfect face twisted with contempt. "Be grateful we give you purpose." But Kira was far from the mindless servant they believed her to be. Her species had perfect memory, able to recall every detail they experienced. She remembered every face that came to their parties, every whispered conversation about illegal deals, every security code carelessly entered in her presence. Someday, this information would be useful. The party continued late into the night. Kira's markings grew dimmer as her strength faded, but she didn't dare stop. A wealthy businessman approached, peering at her like she was an interesting insect. "Fascinating creature," he said to Do Young. "I've heard Luminary can create complex messages with their light patterns. Can she do that?" Do Young laughed. She's not that sophisticated. Just basic light shows. He had no idea that Kira understood every word, or that she could indeed communicate complex ideas through light. She kept this ability hidden, knowing it was better if they underestimated her. Late that night, alone in her tiny room in the basement, Kira allowed herself to cry. Her tears glowed faintly with bioluminescence, a trait unique to her species. But even in her sorrow, she maintained her quiet resistance. She used her glow to write poems on the wall. Poems about freedom, about justice, about hope. The patterns faded quickly, leaving no trace, but the act of creation helped her remember who she was. She thought about her family back home, wondering if they still searched for her. The Luminary were peaceful people, but they were not weak. Their perfect memories and ability to communicate through light made them natural record keepers and scholars. Kira used these gifts now, memorizing everything that might help her escape or bring her captors to justice. Through the small window of her room, she could see the lights of New Seoul sparkling like stars. Somewhere out there, she believed, someone would notice what was happening in this house. The Luminary had a saying, "Even the darkest night cannot last forever." Kira held on to this truth, waiting for her chance. Every day, she watched the house's security systems, noting patterns in the guard rotations. She memorized which guests seemed uncomfortable with her presence, marking them as possible allies. She learned which servants might be sympathetic to her plight. Most importantly, she noticed when things changed. New security measures, unusual visitors, nervous behavior from Do Young. Something was making her captors uneasy. More security cameras had been installed recently, and Do Young spent long hours in his office talking in angry whispers. Kira kept her glow dim and steady, playing the role of the broken slave while her mind recorded every detail. The Luminary were patient people. They could wait centuries for the right moment to act. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Kira's markings pulsed gently with an ancient luminary prayer. Light guide us home, through darkness deep, to freedom's shore where we may leap. She had faith that someday, somehow, her light would shine freely again. Jiho adjusted his tool belt as he walked through the polished halls of Do Young's mansion. His maintenance uniform helped him blend in with the other workers, but his mind worked differently than most. Years of studying alien languages had trained him to notice patterns that others missed, and the beautiful alien servants' light displays had caught his attention from his first day on the job. Working on the mansion's climate control system, Jiho watched Kira from the corner of his eye. Her markings weren't just creating pretty lights. They followed specific rhythms, repeating in ways that reminded him of the syntactic structures he'd studied in xenolinguistics class. Before taking this job to pay for his studies, he had read about the Luminary and their sophisticated light-based communication. Today, he was replacing filters in the main hall while Kira cleaned nearby windows. Her markings pulsed softly, and Jiho noticed they changed whenever someone walked past. Not random changes, specific patterns for specific people. He recognized warning pulses when Do Young approached, and different signals for various servants. "The Upper East Wing needs checking," the head of maintenance told Jiho. "The security cameras are acting up again." Jiho nodded and grabbed his toolkit. This gave him another chance to document the illegal modifications Do Young had made to the security system. He had noticed extra cameras hidden in the walls, covering angles that weren't listed in the official house plans. As he worked, Jiho remembered his grandmother's stories about helping people escape from dangerous situations. She had taught him that sometimes the quietest person in the room had the most important things to say. Kira rarely spoke, but her lights were constantly telling stories to anyone who knew how to read them. Moving through the mansion's service corridors, Jiho kept a small recorder hidden in his toolkit. He noted the times of suspicious deliveries, the faces of visitors who arrived late at night, the conversations he overheard while fixing things in Do Young's office. Each detail might help build a case against whatever illegal operation was happening here. Kira appeared in the hallway, carrying cleaning supplies. As she passed Jiho, Her markings flickered in a pattern he had seen before in his studies, the universal distress signal used by space-faring races. He nearly dropped his screwdriver in surprise. She knew he was watching. She was trying to communicate. Pretending to check a control panel, Ji-ho whistled a few notes of a luminary folk song he had learned in his studies. Kira's markings pulsed briefly brighter. She recognized the melody. For the first time, he saw hope flicker across her face. Later that day, while fixing a broken door sensor, Ji-ho overheard Do-young arguing with someone in his office. Words like shipment and merchandise drifted through the walls, along with mentions of large sums of money. He added these details to his growing collection of evidence. The mansion's security systems were complex, but Ji-ho had learned them all while doing maintenance. He knew which cameras had blind spots, which doors had backup power supplies, which guards were less attentive during their shifts. Every bit of information could be useful when the time came to act. At home that night, Ji-ho reviewed his notes carefully. He had recordings of unusual security installations, lists of suspicious visitors, and patterns in Kira's light signals that proved she was sending intelligent messages, not just providing entertainment. But he needed to be absolutely certain before he could risk contacting authorities. The next morning, Ji-ho arrived early to check the mansion's backup generators. As he worked, he saw Kira being led to the ballroom for another day of forced performance. Her markings pulsed in a pattern that he now recognized as a poem about freedom. His heart ached, but he forced himself to keep working normally. One wrong move could put them both in danger. During his lunch break, Ji-ho carefully studied the mansion's maintenance logs. He noticed patterns in power usage that didn't match normal household operations. The security systems drew more power during certain late-night hours, suggesting secret activities. He documented everything, building a clearer picture of Do-young's illegal operations. Kira passed through the maintenance area, carrying linens. Her markings flickered rapidly. She was using simplified luminary script, something Ji-ho had studied, but never seen in person. He caught words about guards, schedules, and hidden rooms. She was giving him vital information while appearing to simply go about her work. As the day went on, Ji-ho moved through the mansion with purpose, his mind recording every detail while his hands did routine maintenance work. He knew he wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was gathering intelligence that could save lives. The question was, who could he trust with this information? The answer came to him while fixing a broken light fixture. His old university professor had connections with the Interstellar Rights Commission. They would know how to handle this situation legally and safely. Ji-ho just needed to gather enough evidence to convince them to investigate. As darkness fell over New Seoul, Ji-ho finished his shift, knowing he had begun something important. Tomorrow he would begin reaching out to people who could help, but tonight he had given Kira something she hadn't had in a long time: hope. Her light signals had grown stronger after their brief exchange, showing him that even the smallest act of kindness could make a difference. The tension in Do-young's mansion grew heavier each day. Ji-ho noticed increased security and overheard fragments of conversations about a final sale. While fixing a broken security panel, he caught words that made his blood run cold. They planned to sell Kira to the notorious mining operations in the asteroid belt, where few aliens survived the harsh conditions. Na-young sat at her desk in the Interstellar Rights Commission, reviewing the evidence Ji-ho had sent her. The young maintenance worker had documented everything meticulously: power usage patterns, security modifications, mysterious late-night deliveries, and most importantly, translations of Kira's light-based messages pleading for help. "This is definitely trafficking," Na-young told Ji-ho during their secure video call. "But Do-young has powerful friends. We need to build an airtight case." Ji-ho worked even harder to gather evidence, taking risks he wouldn't have dared before. He planted tiny recording devices during routine maintenance checks. His hands trembled as he worked, knowing discovery would mean severe consequences, but Kira's increasingly desperate light signals drove him forward. Na-young brought in Ta-hun, a gruff former security specialist, who had helped break up other trafficking rings. "The mansion's security is top-notch," he said, studying Jaiho's diagrams. "But every system has weaknesses. We just need to find them." Their team grew carefully, each member chosen for specific skills. Myran, a doctor who specialized in luminary physiology, provided crucial information about Kira's medical needs during and after rescue. "Her species can't survive sudden darkness," she explained. "We need portable light sources ready." Kira noticed the subtle changes around her. New guards appeared, speaking in hushed tones about transport schedules. Du Young hosted more private meetings in his office, and she caught glimpses of mining operation logos on visitors' tablets. Her light patterns became more urgent, knowing her time was running out. Jaiho worked carefully to decode her messages while appearing to fix various systems around the mansion. They planned to move her in 3 days, he told Ne Young during their next secure call. "The mining company is sending a private shuttle." The rescue team gathered in Ne Young's office after hours, spreading maps and diagrams across her desk. Tai Hun pointed out security weak points, while Myran explained medical requirements. They had to move fast, but couldn't risk mistakes. One wrong step could mean death for Kira. "The power system is key," Jaiho explained, showing them the mansion's electrical layouts. "I can create a distraction by triggering specific failures, but we'll only have minutes before the backup systems engage." Do Young grew more agitated as the sale approached. Kira's light patterns told Jaiho about increased security measures and overheard arguments about prices and timing. The mansion felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Ne Young worked through official channels, preparing legal documents they would need. "The moment we move, everything must be by the book," she insisted. "Du Young will try to fight this in court." Myran gathered medical supplies, preparing for any condition Kira might be in. "The psychological trauma may be worse than the physical," she warned. "Luminary are deeply social beings. Extended isolation affects them severely." Tai Hun trained the rescue team in quick, quiet movement. "We go in fast, we get out faster," he repeated. "No heroics, no delays." His experience showed in every precise instruction he gave. The mansion's other servants sensed something coming. They worked quietly, keeping their heads down, pretending not to notice the increased security or Kira's dimming lights. Jaiho knew some of them wanted to help but were too afraid of Du Young's power. Time seemed to move too quickly and too slowly at once. Jaiho maintained his normal routine while finalizing rescue preparations. Every tool in his belt now had a dual purpose: repair and rescue. Every maintenance check was also a security check. Kara's messages became more detailed as she realized help was coming. She reported guard rotations, door codes, and the locations of hidden security measures. Her light patterns grew stronger, hope giving her new energy despite her fear. Ne Young coordinated with local authorities, ensuring they would respond correctly when needed. "We'll have one chance," she reminded the team. Everything must work perfectly. The day before the planned mining company transfer, Du Young hosted one final party. Kira stood in her usual spot, her lights creating beautiful patterns that now carried hidden meanings. Each flash and color told Jaiho about guard positions and security changes. Tai Hun positioned his people carefully around the mansion's perimeter, disguised as ordinary workers and passersby. Myran waited in a nearby medical facility, her team ready for any emergency. The rescue network was in place, waiting for the signal. Jaiho felt the weight of their plan as he made his final maintenance rounds. Every step had to work perfectly: the power failure, the security breach, the medical evacuation. Kira's life depended on every person doing their part exactly right. Her last message to him that evening was simple but clear: "Ready." The light pattern flickered briefly before returning to the mindless entertainment display Du Young expected. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. As night fell over New Seoul, the rescue team made their final preparations. Ne Young reviewed legal documents, Tai Hun checked his equipment, Mai Ran prepared her medical bay, and Jiho tried to steady his nerves. They all knew that tomorrow would require perfect timing, steady nerves, and perhaps a bit of luck. The evening of Du Young's final party arrived with perfect weather, a light rain that kept casual onlookers indoors. Inside the mansion, wealthy guests mingled in their finest clothes, sipping expensive drinks while Kira performed her usual light show in the grand ballroom. No one noticed that her patterns were slightly different tonight. Jai-Ho moved through the service areas, his tool belt loaded with specialized equipment, hidden among normal repair tools. He kept his face calm as he worked, though his heart raced. Through the walls, he could hear Du Young bragging about his latest business deals to a group of mining executives. Ta Hun's team had positioned themselves carefully around the property. Some posed as catering staff, others as security guards hired for the party. They communicated through tiny earpieces, coordinating their movements as they waited for the signal to begin. First stage beginning. Jai-Ho whispered into his hidden microphone as he accessed the main security panel. His fingers moved quickly, entering codes that would start a cascade of small system failures. Nothing major enough to cause immediate alarm, just enough to keep the security team distracted. Kira noticed the first changes immediately. Security cameras began switching off one by one, appearing to fail randomly. She kept her light show steady, but prepared herself for what was coming. Years of slavery had taught her patience. Now she would use that patience to help secure her freedom. Outside the mansion, Ne Young straightened her official uniform and checked her documents one final time. Local police waited quietly in unmarked vehicles, ready to move when needed. The inspection warrant in her hand was genuine. They had made sure everything was legal. Security team to Sector 3, crackled the mansion's radio system. We're having camera malfunctions. Just as planned, guards began moving away from their usual posts to check the failing systems. Jai-Ho triggered the second stage of failures. Environmental controls started acting up, sending security teams scrambling to prevent the expensive artwork from being damaged by temperature changes. In the confusion, Ta Hun's people slipped into position. Kira's light show suddenly intensified, drawing everyone's attention. The patterns were beautiful, but also strategically bright, making it hard for the remaining security cameras to adjust. She had practiced this routine in secret, preparing for this moment. Ne Young chose this instant to approach the main gate, her warrant ready. Interstellar Rights Commission, she announced firmly. We have authority to conduct an immediate inspection. The guards, already dealing with system failures, had no choice but to let her in. Du Young's face darkened with anger when he saw Ne Young and her team entering his party. He started toward them, but stopped short as more officials appeared behind them. The guests began to whisper, sensing something was wrong. Jai-Ho triggered the final stage, a complete power reset that would take exactly 3 minutes to resolve. In those 3 minutes, everything would happen. The backup generators would kick in, but by then it would be too late. Kira seized her moment in the darkness. Her natural bioluminescence lit up in a blinding flash, disorienting everyone nearby. She moved quickly toward the prearranged meeting point, her feet silent on the polished floors she had cleaned so many times. Stay where you are, Du Young shouted, but his voice was lost in the confusion. Guests stumbled in the dark. Security teams tried to respond to multiple alarms, and through it all, Kira's light led the rescue team exactly where they needed to go. Tai Hun's people moved with practiced efficiency, securing routes and blocking pursuers. Years of experience in rescue operations showed in their quick, precise movements. No one got hurt, but no one got past them either. Mai Ran waited in a medical transport vehicle, hidden in plain sight among the party guests' expensive cars. Her team had everything ready: light therapy equipment, medical supplies, and comfortable clothes to replace Kira's servant uniform. The mansion erupted into chaos as the backup generators came online. Security teams found themselves confronted by local police. Du Young's guests discovered their host being served with multiple warrants. Evidence of trafficking and other crimes began to emerge as officials searched the property. Kira reached the medical transport safely, her light dimming as exhaustion and emotion overcame her. Myran immediately wrapped her in a special blanket designed to reflect and amplify bioluminescence, helping her maintain her natural light levels. Jaiho completed his part by downloading all security footage and system logs, evidence that would help prosecute Du Young and his associates. His hand shook as he finished, relief flooding through him as he realized they had succeeded. Ne Young efficiently coordinated the police and commission officials, ensuring everything was documented properly. More evidence of trafficking emerged as they searched the mansion. Hidden rooms, false documents, illegal modification of security systems. Du Young's perfect world crumbled around him as his guests were questioned and his property searched. His wife's face showed shock as she realized their carefully built facade was shattering. Years of illegal operations were being exposed in a single evening. Outside, Kira sat safely in the medical transport, watching rain fall on the mansion's windows. Her markings pulsed with a pattern that needed no translation. Pure joy at finally being free. Myran checked her vital signs, while Tahun's team secured the area. Later that night, as officials continued to process the scene, Jaho passed by the medical transport. Through the window, he saw Kira's lights glowing in a pattern he recognized, the ancient luminary symbol for gratitude. He smiled, knowing that while their work wasn't over, the hardest part was done. In the soft light of the medical center's special recovery room, Kira's bioluminescent patterns slowly grew stronger. Myran had designed the room specifically for luminary healing, with walls that reflected and amplified natural light patterns. Each day brought small improvements as Kira's body remembered how to glow freely. Myran checked her patient's vital signs carefully, noting how Kira's natural light rhythms were becoming more stable. "Your body is healing well," she said gently, watching the rippling patterns of blue and green that showed Kira was feeling more comfortable. The physical marks of her captivity were fading, though some would leave permanent scars. Jaiho visited every day after finishing his new job at the medical center's maintenance department. He sat with Kira, practicing the light language he had studied for years, but never truly understood until now. His attempts often made her laugh. Her markings would pulse with amusement when he got the patterns wrong. "You're improving," Kira told him one day, both in words and light patterns. Her voice was growing stronger too, though she still preferred communicating through light. "Soon you'll be able to tell proper stories." Her own light stories had become more complex as she healed, sharing tales of her home world that left Jiho amazed at the depth of her culture. In another part of the city, Ne Young worked tirelessly on the legal case. Du Young's arrest had opened doors to a massive trafficking investigation. His computers held records of deals with criminal organizations across 3 star systems. Each new discovery made the case stronger, but also revealed how many others needed help. Kira's recovery included daily sessions with counselors who specialized in helping trafficking survivors. Some days were harder than others. Sometimes her lights would dim to almost nothing as memories overwhelmed her. During these times, Myran would sit quietly with her, providing gentle light therapy until the darkness passed. The investigation team often visited to record Kira's testimony. She shared everything she had memorized during her captivity: conversations, deals, visitor identities. Jiho translated her light patterns, which could convey complex information more quickly than spoken words. Her perfect memory proved invaluable to the prosecution. "Each pattern tells a story," Jiho explained to the investigators, watching Kira's lights dance as she described a secret meeting she had witnessed. The way the colors shift shows not just what happened, but subtle details about the people involved, their emotions, their hidden reactions. Myran monitored Kira's progress carefully, celebrating small victories. The first time Kira slept through the night without nightmares, her markings glowing peacefully. The day she felt strong enough to walk in the medical center's garden. The moment she created her first new art piece since her rescue, a beautiful light pattern that brought tears to the eyes of everyone who saw it. News of Du Young's arrest spread through the criminal underworld, causing panic among his associates. Ne Young's team worked quickly to catch them before they could hide evidence or flee. Kira's detailed testimony helped them know exactly where to look and who to watch. Jaiho found himself becoming not just a translator, but a bridge between Kira's world and his own. He shared stories about Earth, while she taught him about luminary culture. Their friendship grew stronger as they helped each other understand their different ways of seeing the universe. The medical center became a safe haven for Kira. Other patients and staff learned basic light greetings to welcome her when she walked the halls. Her natural artistic talent emerged again as she created beautiful light displays to cheer up sick children. Healing others helped her heal herself. During one of their daily talks, Kira shared something important with Jaiho. Her lights formed patterns he had never seen before, the sacred stories of her people, passed down through generations. These stories are usually only shared among luminary, she told him, but you have earned the right to learn them. Myran noticed how teaching Jaiho helped Kira regain confidence. When explaining complex light patterns, her markings would glow with their old strength. The doctor made sure they had time and space for these lessons, seeing how therapeutic they were for her patient. The prosecution team prepared for trial, organizing evidence and testimony. Kira's unique way of giving evidence, through light patterns recorded and translated, would set legal precedent. Ne Young worked to ensure every detail was properly documented and admissible in court. As weeks passed, Kira began helping other rescued trafficking victims. Her own experience and gentle nature made her a natural counselor. Through light patterns, she could communicate comfort and understanding even to those who didn't speak her language. One evening, as sunset painted the sky in colors that reminded her of home, Kira created a new light pattern. Jaiho watched in awe as she combined traditional luminary forms with patterns inspired by Earth's culture. "This is my story now," she explained. "Not just survival, but growth. Not just healing, but becoming stronger." Myran's medical reports showed consistent improvement in Kira's physical and emotional health. The doctor had never seen someone recover so well from such trauma. She credited not just the medical care, but the support network that had formed around her patient. Jaiho's friendship, Ne Young's dedication to justice, and the kindness of countless others. "Your light shines brighter every day," Jaiho told Kira as they watched the stars come out. Her answering pattern showed hope, strength, and something new, a sense of belonging in this place so far from her home world. Together, they were creating a new kind of story, one about healing and friendship across the stars. The grand chamber of the Interstellar Council sparkled with light from 1,000 different worlds. Kira stood at the center, her bioluminescent markings glowing strong and steady. One solar cycle had changed so much. The scared slave had become a powerful voice for change. Jaiho watched from his seat among the delegates, remembering the day they first met. Now Kira's light patterns showed not fear but strength as she addressed the gathered representatives. Her story had caught the attention of worlds across the galaxy, bringing hope to others trapped in darkness. "The traffickers rely on our silence." Kira's lights pulsed as she spoke, creating patterns that the Council's translation systems rendered in dozens of languages. "They believe their victims will remain forever invisible. Today, we proved them wrong." The evidence she had gathered during her captivity had led to hundreds of arrests. Du Young's trial had ended in a lengthy prison sentence, his criminal empire crumbling as more victims came forward. But Kira wasn't satisfied with just one victory. She wanted to prevent others from suffering as she had. Myran sat beside Jaiho, beaming with pride at her former patient. The doctor had helped establish new medical protocols for treating rescued trafficking victims, incorporating Kira's insights about the importance of cultural healing alongside physical recovery. Ne Young stood at a podium nearby, presenting the new detection systems they had developed. The protocols used lessons learned from Kira's rescue. Patterns of power usage, suspicious security modifications, unusual supply orders. Things that seemed normal alone but together painted a picture of trafficking operations. Each species has unique gifts, Kira continued, her lights creating beautiful patterns that made her point better than words alone could. The luminary remember perfectly. Humans notice patterns others miss. When we work together, the traffickers cannot hide. The council chamber hummed with discussion as representatives saw the potential. Species that had long distrusted each other found common ground in fighting exploitation. Kira's story showed how cooperation could succeed where individual efforts had failed. Jai-Ho thought about how far they'd come. He now headed a special unit training maintenance workers to spot signs of trafficking. His team had already prevented 3 attempted trafficking operations by noticing the same patterns he'd seen in Do Young's mansion. Kira's light patterns shifted to show statistics, numbers of rescues, arrests, prevented crimes. But she also showed something more powerful, stories of healing and hope. Former victims becoming advocates, rescued people helping rescue others, communities coming together to protect the vulnerable. We must be as patient as the traffickers are clever, she told the council. They build their networks slowly, carefully. We must be even more careful in taking them apart. Her lights pulsed with determination that needed no translation. The new protocols weren't just rules on paper. They represented a fundamental shift in how species work together. Kira and Jai-Ho had spent months traveling to different worlds, teaching people to look past their differences and see patterns of exploitation. Myran's medical research had revealed surprising similarities in how different species recovered from trauma. Pain is universal, she had written in her groundbreaking paper, but so is healing when we support each other. Na-Young's legal team had successfully prosecuted trafficking cases that crossed species boundaries, setting precedents that made it harder for criminals to exploit gaps between different worlds' laws. The evidence-gathering techniques they developed became standard practice across the galaxy. Kira's lights formed the ancient luminary symbol for hope as she concluded her presentation. Each of us has known darkness, she said, her patterns reflecting off the chamber's crystal walls. Together, we can bring light to those still trapped in shadow. The council chamber erupted in applause, expressed in dozens of different ways by different species. Some flashed lights like Kira. Others hummed or clicked or waved appendages. All understood the importance of what they had witnessed. Later, in a quiet moment between meetings, Kira and Jai-Ho stood watching ships come and go from the council station. Her lights formed familiar patterns, their private language developed over months of friendship. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, both in words and light. "That day when you first noticed my patterns in the mansion." Jai-Ho smiled, responding with his own careful light pattern. "Still not perfect, but meaningful. I hoped we could save one person. You've helped save thousands." Their work was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new victims to help, new traffickers to stop. But they had built something powerful, a network of people from different worlds working together to protect the vulnerable. Kira's markings pulsed with the colors of sunrise on her home world, a pattern of new beginnings. She had transformed her trauma into a force for change, her memories of darkness into tools for bringing light. The Interstellar Council's new protocols would make trafficking harder across the galaxy, but the real change was in how people thought about the problem. Kira and Jai-Ho had shown that the greatest power came not from any one species, but from all of them working together. As stars twinkled through the station's windows, Kira created one final pattern, the story of a maintenance worker who noticed something wrong and a slave who never stopped hoping. Their story had become much bigger than either of them, spreading light across the darkness between stars.